Good afternoon. This is, the September Wellness Webinar. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. Everybody has been muted upon entry. That's to avoid any of the background noise. At the end of the webinar, there will be an anonymous survey, so your feedback is greatly appreciated. If you have any questions throughout this webinar, please chat directly to Kristen. And then everyone who registered for this webinar today will receive a link to the recording in just a few days. Next slide, Allison. Please remember, this information provided in the presentation is intended solely for the general information of the audience. It is not medical advice and shall not replace consultation with your physician or other qualified health provider. If you have any health-related questions or problems, please seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider. Next slide. All right, we are excited today to be talking about understanding burnout, and we are pleased to have our very own Allison King, Clinical Program Manager with HealthNet, to present to us today. Go ahead and take it away, Allison.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So we're going to start by just talking about stress. Stress is inevitable. It's a completely normal thing to experience and a normal part of life. Some stress is good. It puts us into action, but long-term chronic stress can really lead to burnout and wreak havoc on our physical and mental health. So today's presentation will be discussing stress in more detail, burnout and their impact, as well as some suggested ways to build resilience to improve our ability to weather life's storms and protect us from burnout. So I'm going to start on a little soapbox by quoting the Dalai Lama. If every 8-year-old in the world is taught meditation, we will eliminate violence from the world within 1 generation. I mean, imagine that. In the very least, breath awareness and breath regulation techniques, if those were built into professional training programs, especially those known to be highly stressful, like the medical field and first responders, and better yet, if it were required learning for everyone starting in an elementary school, imagine what things would be like. You know, the need for mental health care was going up even before the pandemic, and since it's grown exponentially for so many reasons. Life disruption caused by the pandemic, the loneliness epidemic, wars abroad and the socio-political climate here at home, school shootings, gun violence, global warming, the impact of social media. I can keep going on, the list is so long, all of which helps keep our systems activated and on alert, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. We're always constantly bombarded with things going on, can't get away from information overload. The good thing is that stigma has been reduced, and talking about things like stress and anxiety, burnout, and the importance of self-care have all become part of our normal conversations. Some people are even beginning to seek mental health care preventatively, like we do with physical health care, which for me as a mental health practitioner gives me so much hope. I'm so glad to see people looking at mental health care differently instead of it being only intervention or time of crisis, that people are starting to come in a bit more preventatively, knowing that it's an important part of their overall health and well-being. So anyway, so let's dive in. Okay, we're going to start with the basics. What is stress? Stress is emotional and psychological response to an event or a thought, which is interesting if you think about it because it can be generated just from our mind. It doesn't have to be something concrete happening in real time outside of our own selves. It's a state of anxiety, which occurs when we perceive something is beyond our control or ability to manage or cope. Stress basically causes dysregulation in our system, both emotionally and physiologically. And there's a couple different types of stress. So we're going to talk about the different types of stress and their relation to burnout. So there's 3 different kinds. A little dose of stress isn't bad, and that would be considered acute stress. Acute stress puts us into action and can usually be managed with our typical coping mechanisms. Examples are starting a new job, taking a test, speaking in public. Episodic acute is more serious, but usually time limited, like a car accident or going through a natural disaster. And then there's chronic stress. Chronic stress prolongs the activation of our body's stress response and can cause a whole slew of physical and mental health challenges because, as we know, physical and mental health are completely intertwined. Okay, so I'm not a scientist in any way, shape, or form, so I feel a little funny about presenting this information, but I'm going to give a basic primer on how the physiological stress response works so it can ground us in what I'm going to be talking about in a bit in scientific terms. So let's say you're crossing the street and you can see a car coming fast and it doesn't look like it's going to stop. Your sense organs, your eyes and maybe your ears, send the information to the amygdala, which is partly responsible for emotional processing. And look how tiny it is on this picture. It's so tiny, but it's super powerful. The amygdala interprets the information and instantly sends a distress signal to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus functions like a command center and communicates with the rest of the body through our autonomic nervous system, which has 2 parts. This is important. The sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems. When the sympathetic nervous system gets triggered, it sends signals to the adrenal glands, which respond by pumping the hormone epinephrine, also referred to as adrenaline, into the bloodstream. Epinephrine circulates through the body and activates a bunch of physiological fight or flight reactions, like some of the ones that are listed here. Our pupils might dilate, our mouth might become dry, our heart races, our breathing becomes more pressured and rapid, we might start to sweat, our muscles will get tense, and our digestive system slows down. So this all happens so fast, we aren't even aware it's happening. In fact, it's a very efficient process. It's so efficient that the amygdala and the hypothalamus start this cascade even before the brain's visual center has had a chance to fully process what's going on. And that's why, understandably, our body's working so efficiently, that's why you're able to jump out of the path of the oncoming car without even thinking about it. It's completely automatic. So what happens after that? What happens next? After the perceived danger has passed, it's the parasympathetic nervous system's turn. What's called the rest and digest response kicks in. And we can return to homeostasis and continue on our merry way across the street. So that's the ideal scenario. Okay. So that was pretty basic. I want to break it down just a little bit further to illustrate what happens when we experience more intense or chronic stress. So when the initial surge of adrenaline dies down, if the brain continues to perceive danger, the hypothalamus activates a second component of the stress response system known as the HPA, hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. The HPA axis uses a series of hormonal signals to keep the sympathetic nervous system activated, sending something called ACTH, which is a hormone, to the adrenal glands, which then releases cortisol. Okay, cortisol's main role is to release glucose into the bloodstream in order to facilitate that fight or flight response. But all of that, cortisol, glucose interaction also impacts our immune system and other body systems. Okay, so now, during normal non-stressful situations, there's already a certain level of cortisol in our bloodstream, but stress significantly increases cortisol output. With chronic stress, the HPA axis is continually activated. The cortisol keeps pumping and can result in something a lot of us have either experienced firsthand or have at least heard of: burnout. So burnout, we kind of use this term, sort of off the cuff, but it's actually a condition with a set of both physical and mental health symptoms. And here are some of the key signs of potential burnout, which you can see are both mental health related and physical health related, because as I noted before, those are completely intertwined. So things like being exhausted, really tired, having headaches, depression or very low mood, anxiety, having difficulty sleeping, or not sleeping or sleeping too much, or your body clock might become completely, dysregulated, having some chronic pain. Sometimes it's kind of amorphous, might move around the body. Loss of appetite or difficulty digesting, which would include, GI gastro symptoms, such as constipation or diarrhea, difficulty regulating body temperature, getting hot flashes or feeling really cold, and a suppressed or altered immunity and being susceptible to viral infections and increased allergic symptoms. So just an example, any of us who have been to college or university, it's always interesting, right? Right when final's over, that's when you get sick, right? Like it's so there is a bit of a burnout that happens and our body's holding on, and it's until that time, and then we get sick. So these are some of the most salient symptoms of burnout. Okay, just a little bit more sciencey stuff, and then we're going to shift into stress management and how to protect ourselves from burnout. So chronic stress can lead to burnout, and burnout can lead to various disorders in all of those body systems which get activated during the fight or flight response. Like in our brain, it can lead to, chronic stress can lead to concentration difficulties, diagnosable anxiety and depression, irritability, mood challenges, brain fog. That's a big one for people sometimes. It affects our cardiovascular health. It can create higher cholesterol levels, higher blood pressure, put us at increased risk of heart attack or stroke. Joints and muscles, it creates an inflammation in all over our entire system. Tension, aches and pains, muscle tightness. Again, the immune system, decreased immune functioning, lowered immune defenses, so easier to get sick. Increased risk of all kinds of illnesses, and it takes longer to get over them. It can cause problems in our skin, hair loss. It can make our hair dull or brittle, nails, dry skin. Gut nutrient absorption is a challenge. So again, that can impact our health. Diarrhea, constipation, indigestion, bloating, pain. And then even in our reproductive system, decreased hormone production, decrease in libido. And for those who suffer from PMS, it can really make those worse. So, you know, it really does an incredible number on all of these different body, you know, systems. And additionally, there's been a number of studies which show the impact that stress has on telomere length. So telomeres are a little protective coating, a casing at the end of each strand of DNA. Each time a cell divides, it loses a bit of its telomere. There's an enzyme called telomerase, and that replenishes it, but chronic stress and cortisol decrease its supply. So too much cortisol decreases the supply of telomerase. And when the telomere becomes too small, the cell often dies or can become easily inflamed. So basically, what this means is stress is a true physiological factor for disease and premature aging. So this isn't news, but I thought you might be interested in some of the science behind it. And I do have an article as well as some other resources that can be sent out at a later date, which talks about this if you're interested. So now we're going to shift to what we can do to fortify ourselves against the impact of chronic stress. The challenge with this is that in modern life, like I mentioned in the beginning, there's a continual onslaught, which can keep our systems firing all the time. It's kind of like we're in a constant low-level sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight state a lot of the time. So kind of jokingly, but I like to use a salsa temperature scale to describe this. Basically, for many of us, our baseline state isn't mild, but medium to medium spicy, or even hot. So we have to really work to find ways to both help and protect us from getting burned. Okay, so how do we do this? Stress management. The breath, breathing. Breathing is the most important technique to manage stress. And again, I have some articles about breathing as well, which we can share, but I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about it. Conscious breathing and slowing the breath triggers the brain to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which increases the body's relaxation response by decreasing cortisol production. Breathing helps lower our heart rate, our blood pressure, it relaxes the muscles, increases our mental clarity, and goes on. And I'm going to give some other lists of things later, which are interesting, but I just wanted to give a few tastes there. Basically, it helps turn down the volume on the alarm in our bodies. And there's a lot of different breathing approaches and techniques, and I'm going to explain a couple of them here. If we had more time, I would have us practice some of these, but I just want to explain them briefly. So these are three very common breathing techniques. One is called equal breathing, which is basically, this is where all of these are really just about becoming aware of the breath and using the breath consciously. So when we do breathing exercises, it's recommended to breathe in and out of the nose. And the reason for that is that breathing in and out of the nose helps to slow the system down, slow the body down more. And also, we have those beautiful little nose hairs, which help filter the air as we breathe. So all of these breathing techniques are recommended to be done in and out of the nose. So the first one here, equal breathing, is breathing in for 4 counts, your own count, and then breathing out for 4 counts. And just doing this, repeating this for as many times as you feel like doing it. I usually tell people to do it 5 to 10 times in the very least. Sometimes I recommend that people actually put a little timer on and do these for 3 to 5 minutes or more. The next one in the center there is slow breathing, which is also called extended exhale breathing. So this particular one, this little snapshot shows a minute amount, which isn't necessary, but is always, good. The more you do it, the more you can really feel its effects. So this one is about inhaling for 4 seconds and exhaling for 6 seconds. And you can keep doing this for, again, as many times or as many minutes as you feel you need. And really, this is a kind of thing which I often recommend people practice at regular intervals so your system can get used to conscious breathing. Oftentimes in the morning or in the evening, especially for people who struggle with intense stress and anxiety, the slow breathing technique is really helpful. And over time, if people practice this, sometimes it's recommended to even increase the exhale to be double the inhale. So it takes time, right? But breathing in for 4 seconds and then exhaling for up to 8 seconds. So it also really helps the muscles, the lungs and the intercostal muscles between the ribs to really start to get some mobilization, right, in your chest area and in your lungs and in your ribs. Another one which is good is box breathing. Again, this is using 4 counts is just the typical amount that's suggested, but some people do 3 for any of these, or some people do 5. So whatever works for you. But it's basically breaking the breath down into 4 parts. So emptying the lungs with 0 breath and holding that for your own 4 counts. Inhaling slowly through the nose for 4 counts. Holding your breath at the top with your lungs full for 4 counts rather, sorry. And then exhaling through the nose gently for 4 counts. And then starting again, 0 breath, empty lungs, 4 counts. Inhaling 4 counts, holding 4 counts, and then letting it out through your nose for 4 counts. So there are tons of different breathing exercises out there. And I encourage you to look up different ones and explore them if you want to learn more about it. Learn different ways of working with the breath to find which ones that feel right for you. Because it's a very individual and personal practice to find which breathing is going to work the best. Okay. So let's move on to how to manage stress on a more comprehensive scale. Breathing is always wonderful, should be practiced, I think, regularly for all of us. It can also be used in the moment when you are feeling that physiological stress response happening. But we need to look at this, more comprehensively, starting with the general concept of self-care. So what is self-care? Self-care is our deliberate activities we consciously engage in to take care of ourselves. And why do we need to do it? It's really the key to building resilience and creating a balanced life. It's necessary to reduce stress and reduce the risk of burnout, anxiety, and depression. And it's required to reduce the impact of chronic stress. So this is a requirement. So it's not a if we need self-care. We have to have self-care. And we really need some pieces, a balanced kind of approach to self-care daily. So although in theory this is simple, it's something we often overlook until we have burnout, right? Or until we're completely depleted. I'm going to focus in on the resilience piece for a few slides, because building resilience helps protect us from the turbulence of life and all the stress that comes our way. So what is resilience? Basically, it's maintaining flexibility and balance in life as you deal with stressful circumstances and traumatic events. It's adaptation to adversity, or some call it the ability to bounce back. It's really feeling or perceiving that you're effective and capable of handling uncertainty and difficulties. And it's really a set of behaviors, thoughts, and actions that can be learned and developed. And that's the good news, right? It's not a characteristic or personality trait necessarily. Some people may have some natural, abilities, or seem to have natural abilities for being resilient, but even those of us who don't seem to have natural resilience, we can create it. I like to think of resilience like a muscle. You have to dedicate time and energy into developing it and keep it conditioned. So when we have to flex it, when we get in those times of stress, we're ready and able. The analogy I like to use is riding a crowded bus or subway when there's nowhere to sit. So if any of you've had this experience, if there's a quick stop or turn, we're standing in the aisle, we have to keep our knees bent, use our thighs, stabilize our core with our core muscles to keep from falling down. For me, this is very similar to resilience. So what specifically can we do to build our resilience muscles? First, I'm going to do a little quick review of a model for resilience. So there's a lot of different models on resilience out there. I like this one because it's straightforward and simple, and it aligns with the concept of whole person self-care, which I'll get to in a few minutes. So really, resilience is this constellation of things, having physical well-being, healthy coping, really strong social support, creating or cultivating positive emotions for ourselves when we can, and having meaning in life. So there's a heap of activities and exercises out there for building resilience. And we're going to spend, and I have some links actually that I'll send after the presentation, but honestly, it can feel like totally overwhelming to know where to start with this. When talking about resilience or what we can do to build it, it's not like saying, again, like a listicle, do these 10 things every day and you'll become more resilient. Instead, it's really about doing a variety of things with consistency to help get through difficult times. And at the end result will be greater resiliency. But just like building resilience, building muscle strength rather, figuring out what works best for you may require some experimenting. And it's dynamic, meaning it can shift depending on what's going on in your life at any given period. Next, I'm going to present a couple of concrete activities that might be helpful on building a path for yourself for resilience. Okay, so these are some suggested activities. So the first one here, positive emotions, changing the narrative. So how does one do this? How does one cultivate positive emotions? So, kind of reframing it, changing the way we look at it. When I was in social work school, they drilled into our heads at that time that the word for crisis in Chinese is made up of two characters, danger and opportunity. Of course, later I found out that this is linguistically not necessarily accurate, but conceptually it makes sense. That's why we have those cliche sayings like, with every good there's a bad, every dark cloud has a silver lining, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. So, this first suggested activity helps move us from the glass is half empty to the glass is half full kind of perspective. It's a journaling exercise, and you can do it for 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, 3 minutes a day, again, whatever works for you. You start with what I call downloading what you're feeling onto paper. I say paper because for me, there's something about that kinesthetic aspect of writing, right? But for some people, they might like to do it on the computer, or I know people who do it on notes on their phone, right? They keep a little journal on their phone. If you don't have time or this sounds overwhelming, you can just write down the feeling words themselves: angry, scared, sad, frustrated, whatever you're feeling in general, or just maybe at that particular moment, followed by, and this is the important part, 2 to 3 positive things. For example, what's happening in your life that's good? Maybe something you're grateful for, large or small. What do you love, or what brings you joy right now? Even little simple things. Like for me, sometimes I do this, I go through 10 things, I do one for each finger, and I do it slowly. And I add in little things like my cup of coffee in the morning. I mean, seriously, that is like brings me so much joy, and I'm so grateful for it. So it can be something little, you know, or the flowers that you see outside your window, whatever it is. So journaling like this both acknowledges our emotional experience, which is really important, and begins to rewire our thought patterns. It actually helps rewire neural pathways in the brain. So studies have shown that people who engage in therapeutic writing exercises like this have an increased sense of well-being and happiness months afterwards. Okay, so Katie, I'm going to speed up just a little bit, just to make sure I can get to all of these things, because I'm going very slowly. Hopefully it's working for you, Katie. Katie's our interpreter, ISL interpreter. So, okay, so this other one, meaning in life. This is a big one. So Dan Buettner, he's the guy who came up with Blue Zones. And if you don't know what those are, I encourage you to look it up, or there's actually a Netflix series you can watch, of course. Did research on longevity around the world and found that there's one of several reasons that women in Okinawa, Japan have such long lifespans is because they have a strong sense of purpose. Apparently, Okinawans are known for pursuing ikigai, which I'm sure I pronounced wrong, but it's a concept that basically means reason for being or reason for waking up in the morning. So, you know, maybe some of us already have a defined sense of purpose or just need to reinforce or reaffirm it. Or maybe we used to have a sense of purpose, but because of changes in our life, possibly because of the natural course of the human life cycle, like, for example, for me, kids going, leaving the home and going off to college, like my sense of purpose has shifted a bit. We've lost touch with it, or maybe we need a new sense of purpose. For others, maybe you never really had a sense of purpose or even knew that having one helps give life more meaning. I have some articles referenced here, which again might be helpful, and I'll send those later on. Another activity which can be helpful with creating meaning might be engaging in acts of kindness. It could be random, like putting an extra shopping cart back in the parking lot at a store, or structured, like volunteering. As an example, I volunteer teach chair yoga at a local senior center, which helps me stay connected to my sense of purpose. So finding those things. Okay, last one here, social. We humans are designed as social animals, so socializing isn't optional for us, it's mandatory for our survival. Relationships with others are a well-researched, reliable path to wellness. And here are some suggestions to stay connected. Me, number one, pick up the phone. We all know there's incredible convenience and efficiency with texting, communicating through social media, emailing, etc. But they really limit true personal connection and don't really alleviate our sense of isolation or loneliness. In fact, there are studies which indicate that communicating digitally can increase our sense of loneliness. So here's a simple way to do this. If you're even thinking about someone, if they just come to your mind, just pick up the phone real quick, if you have a moment. That happy surprise at a random call can really leave both you as the caller and the receiver feeling happy and connected. And in the alternative, and I try to do this at least a couple times a month, I try to schedule time with someone in my life, either for a call or a low impact get together, like a coffee or a walk. And I say low impact because all of us are always pressed for time, right? Okay, here's another one, maybe to meet new people, maybe join a group or take a class if you have time. maybe re-engage in an old hobby or interest or experiment with a new one. Just another quick personal example, I always wanted to try Zumba. So I went to one in my community a couple weeks ago just to try it out. It was so much fun. I don't know if I have time to do it regularly, but it made me feel connected to other people, and really being around other people joyfully was very, very fulfilling. Okay, so I'm not going to get into this super depthfully, but this is specifically listed in the resilience model that I showed, but it basically falls into a couple of those spheres in that constellation of resilience, like coping and positive emotions. So luckily, mindfulness is everywhere. So I just want to take a moment about it. It comes from a Buddhist practice with the religious and spiritual aspects removed, and there's loads of research to validate its effectiveness. So, and the terms mindfulness and meditation are often used interchangeably. So I just gave this little Venn diagram to help you be a little bit more oriented to the differences and then the melding of the two. Basically, mindfulness is a mental state of awareness, which is best accessed through consciously slowing down. And meditation is only one of the many ways to step into it. So there's actually things like mindful housework, right? Believe it or not, mindful eating, mindful movement, or yoga, or Tai Chi. So mindful meditation is not about shutting the brain down. People think that. It's more about mono versus multitasking. It's really about observing the mind working and being non-judgmental, and really paying to the present moment through our breath and our senses. It helps to put us in the present moment. It's really an evidence-based practice, which there's been a bunch of studies. It's good for our physical health. I'm going to give you a couple of things. Stress reduction, number one, decreased emotional reactivity, improved insight, improved memory, focus, and cognitive flexibility, processing speed. It actually slows cognitive decline. There are studies that says it's helpful for people who are suffering from Alzheimer's. Higher sense of well-being, lowers blood pressure, and reduces the risk for heart disease, improves our immune function. I mean, I could keep going on, but I won't. But I do need to note that because it's so popular, mindful meditation, there's been some recent research about potential downsides, and it's been suggested that mindful meditation should come with a warning label because it's not a panacea. And it's not for everyone. So if you're interested in diving into it more deeply, make sure you do your own research and, be aware of the pros and cons of it. But for most people, it can really be preventative medicine and can help build resilience. If you're interested in it, you only need to spend 5 or 10 minutes a day on a consistent basis to reap the benefits. Okay, back on my soapbox just for a second. I always say to people, if we have time to be on social media, we have time to spend a few minutes on a meditation app, if for nothing else, to simply become aware of our breath and train our nervous system to slow down. Okay, whole person care. So the overarching goal of self-care, self-care basically is building resilience. A lot of different models to conceptualize it, but I call this one whole person self-care. And the idea is to develop daily practices in each of these different domains, biological, social, psychological, and spiritual, as equally as we can to have a balanced life. And I've included some self-care evaluation in the end of the presentation, so you can kind of figure out where you may be deficient in some of these areas. We'll touch on a couple of these domains in a minute, but I wanted to quickly talk about spiritual because it relates to the meaning in life, which we talked about a few minutes ago. So obviously a true discussion of this is outside of the scope of this presentation, but I just wanted to make a plug for it because religion and spirituality are not necessarily one and the same. If you have a spiritual practice, they can be completely intertwined, but they don't have to be. If you have a spiritual practice, it's really important to always attend to that part of ourselves. It can help bring a sense of perspective and meaning and purpose to our lives. If you don't have a spiritual practice, might be a good time to think about what spirituality means to you, because big existential questions like, what is my purpose in life, can really come up in times of difficulty. And it's those times of difficulty which can lead to chronic stress and burnout. Okay, first and foremost, we have to have a daily life routine. It is our foundation. And hopefully you have a routine that works. And when it stops working, you're able to make needed adjustments. You know, having something, you know, a baseline or a daily rhythm really grounds us and helps create a sense of normalcy and predictability. And both normalcy and predictability are both stress busters. And self-care needs to be built into our daily routine. So, you know, one time I gave this presentation, somebody said, what happens if all I can do is nothing? This just seems so intense. And sometimes that is a situation. And doing nothing can be self-care. Laying on the couch and watching Netflix can be exactly what's needed at times. So I just want you to be aware of that. I know this can be overwhelming, but we need to pay attention to our body and what's going on. If we need to slow down and do nothing, then we need to do that. So some of these practices come really easily and naturally, and others take cultivating. I think a lot of us are guilty of telling ourselves, you know, I don't have enough time. But the idea here is to redefine and reframe what self-care is and begin to practice them daily. And then it feels manageable and it becomes a habit. That's the goal. So what I have here, as you can see on the left, are all of these. There's the different domains that I've outlined for whole person self-care, some of the classic concepts of how to care for ourselves, and then reframing these things into suggested daily doable practices. So you're going to get this presentation so you can have a read because we're running out of time, but that's the idea, just to reframe it and sort of build some of these things into our life. Okay, so just really quickly back to the doing nothing example. When we've reached the tipping point, and you know, we may be moving towards burnout or depression or an anxiety disorder, it's super important to have a self-care safety plan. So think of it as an emergency preparedness, like a fire escape map at an office or something like that. So these are some of the things you want to pay attention to and be on the lookout for. And really what we look at is the frequency, intensity, and the duration. So how often is it happening? How long is it happening? And how intense is it, right? So 2 weeks is kind of the marker. So these are some of the things that you might see in each of these domains if you might want to get some help, right? So the initial action plans here for some of these are, you know, talking to your doctor for the biological symptoms, psychological, obviously reach out for behavioral health support. Again, for social, you might want to reach out. And then for spiritual, there's a lot of things that can be done. There's a lot of self-help stuff that can be done. If you have a religious or spiritual advisor, you can consult them, or a group that you might be part of, or contact others in your community. So this is geared towards adults. There's other symptoms that we see in kids, like developmental regression, toileting accidents or bedwetting, like clinginess, irritability, poor school performance, difficulty paying attention. So this, just so you know, this particular safety plan outline is really focusing on adults. And so I just want to quickly run through all these tools and resources, and I hand it back over to Laura. So as I mentioned, this is a little self-care rating scale. So it's more expanded than the one that I presented, but it helps you go through these different areas and see like, oh, maybe I need to spend more time on this and figure these out a little bit more for myself and build them in. And then here's some mindful meditation and breathing resources, different apps listed. They're not in an order of importance. I actually have downloaded all of these at some point and played with them, and then gotten rid of the ones that didn't resonate with me. So I highly recommend doing that, finding one that works. And then here's some other things, the benefits of breathing, some articles about that, a free course for mindful meditation or mindfulness daily at work. And then I've also have some articles, general resources, resilience building, spirituality resources, and then self-care. So yeah, so hopefully I'll be able to get all this together to you and send you the links at a separate time, because when you get this PowerPoint, I don't think you'll be able to access these through the PDF. So that is what I have, as well as help hotlines. I always list the back of my presentation for anybody who might need them. And I'm going to send it back over to Laura. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you everybody for your attention today. These next slides are on programs that help our HealthNet members build and maintain their healthy habits. So as a HealthNet member, you have access to the wellness programs and resources when you log on to your HealthNet account. Next slide, please. Don't forget to take the health risk assessment. This gives you a snapshot of your health in key areas such as nutrition, exercise, emotional health, and financial well-being. Next slide. And if you need some help, so we know that healthy habits can be a challenge, so don't do it alone. Use a health coach. It's a great way to get support while you're trying to make some lifestyle improvements, including managing stress. Next slide. And craving to quit. Now, this is HealthNet's tobacco cessation program. This type of program is designed to help users who are ready to quit to permanently break their addiction to tobacco. Next slide. Eat Right Now. This is our healthy eating or mindful eating program. It focuses on healthy eating habits rather than dieting. Topics include things like triggers, cravings, healthy habits, and emotional eating. Next slide. Unwinding. We know that life is stressful. Allison just talked about that today. So if managing stress is part of your plan to build in a healthy habit, help or look for programs like this one. It helps you to de-stress and help you stay in the moment. So this program is open to both HealthNet and non-HealthNet members.
And I've actually, just to jump in, I've because I download everything. I've used this app. It's really quite good.
Great. Next slide. HealthNet members, don't forget to take advantage of our discounts. Everything from weight management to chiropractic, eye care, some hearing aid and screenings, and then also our fitness club discounts. Next slide. Every month, we offer a variety of online health challenges on stress, steps, and sleep, and they are open to everyone. In October, HealthNet members, we will have Relax Your Mind. This is a 7-day challenge. Next slide, please. And next month, please join us for a financial well-being webinar. So this gives an introduction to getting ahead of your finances and how to prepare for the future. So we hope you'll join us again next month. Thank you so much for your time today. Everyone who registered for this webinar will receive a link to the recording in just a few days. Feel free to exit the webinar at this time.